Donald Trump's financial disclosure released this week shows that he personally made more than $2 billion in his first year back in office, nearly $1.4 billion of it from his crypto ventures with his sons. Meanwhile, the investors who bought into those same crypto projects are out roughly the same amount.
Look, Trump didn't drain the swamp, he franchised it. Every part of Trump's political identity right now has a revenue stream attached to it. Yeah, maybe he's just a really good investor, or maybe the crypto, the watches, the licensing, the Mar-a-Lago foreign deals are all just one big money-making scheme. I think this is why we see all the chaos in Washington right now. It's just a distraction from the money. It's three-card Monte politics. Keep your eyes on this chaos because the cash is moving under the table. But here's why it all matters. Trump made a promise to the American people. Elect me and I will lower inflation, bring down gas prices, and usher in a golden age of America. But for too many Americans, it just simply hasn't happened. Many Americans see a president who is profiting off the presidency while everyone else struggles.
Trump said about his self-dealing, quote, "I found out that nobody cared and I'm allowed to." Both of those are false, right? He is not allowed to. What he's allowed to do is get away with it because the Supreme Court handed him total criminal immunity. And I think, as you point out, Matt, people do care. Corruption is an increasingly salient message for voters. And it's part of what you're seeing in outpourings of support for outsider candidates that are happening in Democratic primaries. It's about being an outsider, being a fighter, being someone who is going to stand up to a system that people see as fundamentally broken. Trump has embodied all of that. Still, as much as people do seem to be caring, it is a very concerning sign for democracy and for the system when the victim isn't even struggling anymore. You're not seeing pushback from Republicans in Congress anymore. That is just bad.
It wasn't that long ago that we attacked Pelosi and other Democrats who we said were profiting off of being in office. And now we don't seem to care when it's Donald Trump. Republicans are going to hold the first ever midterm convention rally in Dallas, September 9th through 10th. The RNC chair has called this Trumpapalooza.
Let's look at some footage from the current Trumpapalooza going on in D.C. right now.
It's a huge space, and it's just going to get more and more crowded as the week goes on.
Not only do we have a lot of people here, we have people that you want to have here, like Stacey Garrity. That woman's going to be next governor of Pennsylvania.
This is fantastic. There's been so much footage floating around the internet. Anyone out there can find it themselves of just how empty it's been at the current Trumpapalooza. Look, I don't understand why any other Republican besides Trump, including his political director, James Blair, thinks this is a good idea with a currently tied Senate race going on in Texas for Trump to become the main selling point here. Isn't the last thing that you want to do as a Republican strategist to remind people that Ken Paxton is tied to Trump? Don't you want to put the focus on Tallarico?
This is the dumbest idea in the history of dumb ideas. We're going to take a president whose polling numbers are in the toilet and make him the closing argument. We have a Congress that has done nothing, completely shit the bed so far this year. What are we going to do this week? Card tricks? We don't have anything to talk about. This is not a midterm strategy. It's a hostage video with balloons.
In all seriousness, is this really Republicans' only move to try to animate the base? Could this actually help them to get Trump out on the trail more?
I think this is more about trying to define the alternative. We have nothing to talk about right now. We have no legislative accomplishments despite holding the House and the Senate. We have a Republican president. We got a conservative court, yet we can't get anything done. Our only strategy, our only move right now is to say Democrats are socialists, and if you vote them, they're going to destroy America.
Speaking of putting Trump center stage, this week, in one day, the Supreme Court fundamentally rewrote how much power a president has, particularly this president, over the federal government, killing a 91-year-old precedent that let Congress shield regulators from at-will firing. The one thing it wouldn't touch was the Federal Reserve. We'll see how long that lasts. Matt, this seems to be a pretty controversial ruling. It definitely hands Trump more power.
Look, the reality is a president should fundamentally have the right to fire people within the executive branch. The problem we're starting to have is we're losing the independence. We're losing the checks and balances. I look at this as overall probably a good thing, but there are a lot of concerns that came with this one for me.
To me, I see a tie to the corruption story that we talked about at the top of the show. That this week, a New York Times investigation found that Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump were financially linked to a tungsten mining project in Kazakhstan. I think Borat is involved as well. And Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick's sons are also involved. It's hundreds of millions of dollars enriching Trump and his family, involving the power of our federal government. Are there watchdogs? If there were, Trump under this ruling could fire them. This is not only part of the overall slide toward the imperial presidency that we've seen, but it's a further unleashing of total immunity and impunity for Trump. Based on the Supreme Court's prior immunity ruling, he can perform any criminal act that he wants. He can enrich himself. He can be corrupt. He can engage in graft. He can engage in quid pro quo deals like he was first impeached for. And so this is essentially blessing a slide toward monarchy. I'm not saying that everything is perfect on the Democrat side, okay? We've been infiltrated by frickin' communists, all right? So we've got a little bit of a communist problem. You have a gigantic monarchist problem.
I say this to my side all the time. You may like this with Trump, but there's a real chance there's going to be a Democrat president coming next. And when that Democrat comes in and they now have this power, it should scare you.
That was a true conservative's answer. Do you feel lonely?
I do feel lonely sometimes here. Yes.
Yeah.
While we're on the Supreme Court, another big case that had to deal with trans sports athletes. Essentially what it said is men should not play in women's sports. But what I found interesting about watching this as it was being reported in real time, watching on Fox News, is the complete meltdown they were having at what should have been seen as nothing but a win. And the reason why is they did not do a universal ban across all 50 states.
They completely gave the game away. It was just like on abortion when Trump himself and pro-life activists for years said, oh, we just want the states to be able to decide this. Roe v. Wade was decided wrongly because it federalized the whole issue. Let the states work this out for themselves. As soon as the Dobbs decision came through, it was all like, actually, we do want a national abortion ban. And it's the same thing here. This entire debate, such as it is, animated by wanting to make a political case out of the vanishingly small number of trans Americans who want to compete in sports in the sex category that they identify with rather than their birth sex. This is not about states' rights or fairness. There's a saying that edge cases make bad law. This is a quintessential edge case. The underlying case at issue here had a plaintiff who's a 15-year-old trans girl. She is the only known openly transgender athlete in West Virginia in any sport. And so you're talking about such a tiny sliver of Americans that this affects. Look, as a longtime youth coach for girls' teams, I understand, I really do, the sensitive issues at play here, the questions of fairness. We know from polling that 69% of Americans believe that transgender girls should only play on boys' teams consistent with their sex at birth. But this is something that should never have had a federal case made out of it. It probably shouldn't have had a legal case made out of it. I think that this is the kind of thing that local authorities, local parents can probably work out on a case-by-case basis. We don't need an edge case to create law. And what Fox News is giving away is they don't really care about this. They don't really care about fairness. They just want to weaponize the issue to target trans people because they know it's a hot button that triggers American voters and gets them on Republicans' side.
I actually think this was a brilliantly decided case. I don't think men should be able to play in women's sports. But what I think was absolutely key here is it gave that right back to the states as a conservative rule of law following the Constitution, that this is the way this case should have been decided. It is not up to the Supreme Court to write the law and change it so that it becomes a national ban. They decided this and said it's up to the states, and every conservative should be happy about that because it's the way the court should act.
The Supreme Court struck down Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship, a win for the 150-year-old plain English reading of the 14th Amendment that any kindergartner should have been able to do. If you peel back the vote a little bit, what looked at first, and it certainly looked this way to me, like a clean 6-3 defeat for Trump, was actually only a single Supreme Court justice away from upending the basic plain English reading of the Constitution and one of the most basic guarantees in American law. What was most troubling about this, Matt, to me, was Clarence Thomas's 91-page dissent, in which he essentially said, this ruling will not stand for long. And when we get another bite at the apple, if we get one more conservative Supreme Court justice, we're going to overturn this.
I fundamentally like Clarence Thomas, but he's completely off base on this. The words are crystal clear. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. I hear this other argument about birth tourism, but we can't pretend that the Constitution is just optional, that there's just a loophole for us to try to find a way from. I also saw people like Jonathan Turley, constitutional scholars, talk about we've never had this real debate, and that if you do want to change it, you have to amend the Constitution. If people want to see that changed, that is the only way it will happen. And so when I read Thomas and I read Kavanaugh and I see what they're writing on the birthright citizenship, it's just a farce. Legally speaking, this is the words that are in the Constitution.
Clarence Thomas is one of the nihilists from The Big Lebowski. We believe in nothing. He doesn't believe in strict constructionism or plain English readings. He believes in achieving whatever result he wants. That's what he's saying in this dissent is, I'm going to get my way eventually, just you watch. And yeah, that should leave the rest of us concerned.